I guess fall is truly well in here, as the trees were giving us a hint, but I think the weather was a little bit delayed. But now I think we're right in the thick of it. So time to break out the coats and the gloves and all that fun stuff. You'll have to give a little extra prayer for my wife, as a Californian, she goes into extra mourning whenever the temperature drops below 60. So you'll have to keep her in your prayers. No, but in all seriousness, good to be here this morning. Good to see that the world continues to turn just as the Lord set it up to do so. And so we're going to continue our discussion this morning, our study. Going to continue on gospel personages of people of the gospel books. And this morning, we're going to be talking about Nathaniel. So if you want to be opening up in your books, we're going to be in the book of John this morning. We're going to be in John chapter 1 starting out. If you want to be opening up there. And so, some basic background on Nathaniel. Nathaniel is obviously one of the 12 apostles. It's interesting that Nathaniel is only called Nathaniel in the book of John. And in the other Gospels, as far as we have, this is still a bit of a talking point amongst biblical scholars, is the idea that Nathaniel and Bartholomew are the same person, because we know about the 12 apostles. We know that those were the 12 main followers. However, Nathaniel is not mentioned in the other three Gospels. However, they mention Bartholomew in those lists of apostles, and in the Gospel of John, the person named Bartholomew is not mentioned, but Nathaniel is mentioned also. We'll kind of get more into why we're pretty sure that Bartholomew and Nathaniel are the same person, but first I want to read a little bit into our text this morning. So it'll kind of help explain why they come to the conclusions they do. So let's, in John chapter 1, if someone wants to read verses 43 through 46. 43 through 46.
The next day Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth, can anything come good from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip.
All right. So, our introduction to Philip and Nathaniel, but specifically looking at Nathaniel. So starting out, this is right after Jesus is called Peter and Andrew, James and John. This is after the whole going out into the boat, telling them to cast their nets. They catch all the fish, they come back in. And so now Jesus is continuing his recruitment tour, so to speak. And so as he goes on in their travels, he wants to go to Galilee. So he goes along the way, and eventually they meet Philip, who is from Bethsaida. Might sound familiar. It's not the same Bethsaida as the healing pool, even though that's the pool of Bethsaida. Different spellings that could mean the same place, and they just misspelled it. But just an interesting side note the book goes into of, like, could be the same, could not be the same, probably not, because there were multiple Bethsaidas. But just kind of a fun aside there. But Philip is from the same city as Andrew and Peter. So they might not necessarily have known each other personally, those three, but however, it's not unfair to guess that they might have at least known of each other. Oftentimes, being from the same town meant that you knew a lot of the same people. You ran in many similar circles because of daily trading, because of whatever business you might have, might literally live close to the other person. So we're finding that, there's lots of connections here and there, whether it's people you know or whether it's your geographical location. But as they continue on, he calls Philip, and Philip says, "All right, cool, we'll follow right along." And he even says, "Now wait a minute, I know a guy. Let me go grab someone real quick." And so he goes and he finds Nathaniel. And he says to Nathaniel, he says, "Hey, we found him who Moses wrote about in the law." Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And what is Nathanael's reaction?
Can any good come out of Nazareth?
Can anything good come out of Nazareth? He doesn't necessarily doubt Jesus himself. His immediate thought is, oh, he came from there? Really? Do we think the Messiah came out of there? And what's funny to note is that that was just where Jesus was living. Of course, we know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, but they don't know this. They just know that the guy is well known for being from Nazareth. Oftentimes, this is kind of construed as, oh, this is Nathanael seriously doubting the validity of the Messiah. I don't think it's quite that serious. For example, if I told you that the next president of the United States was going to be from Minnesota, what is your knee-jerk reaction as someone from Wisconsin?
Oh.
Minnesota? Viking fans? Nothing good can come out of Minnesota. Come on, you're crazy. As Silas can well atone, if you tell a Texan that they have to follow someone who came from Oklahoma or vice versa, there's instantly, the Red River rivalry is well and good and living today, because as soon as you mention Texas to an Okie or Oklahoma to a Texan, it is automatic. Why, you're going there, they're from there. Oh, come on. That can't be right.
That's how the Range Wars started.
Yeah. There is something very, very tense about some of the tightest rivalries in sports and whatever it might be are simply the person who's closest to you. Because you have to be around them. You have to deal with them on a more often basis than folks who are far away. Sometimes you have friendly rivalries with your neighbors. Sometimes they can be a bit less than friendly. But the point is that you're being exposed to that person every single day, every often or not. But so I don't think Nathanael here. And to explain this, Nathanael is from the city of Cana, which geographically, as we know, was very close to Nazareth. So Nazareth might not have been actually a bad place to live or have like a bad crime rate or a bad anything like that. It might have just genuinely been, oh, we have to deal with Nazarenes all the time, and like we're always butting heads on things here and there. It could have been something as innocent as that. It could have also been that Nazareth might have had a rough history. But I think that this whole questioning of Nazareth, can anything good come out of there, is not. Nathanael genuinely believes that no good person can come out of Nazareth, but just that was his reaction to a aspect of Jesus that ultimately we know does not affect the fact that he's the Messiah or the fact that he is a good person or not. It's just that human kind of tendency to have, I don't know, biases kind of takes over. And also something that might be interesting to think of is that how does Philip explain Jesus to Nathanael? What does he refer to Jesus as? He says, we found the one whom the prophets and Moses wrote about in the law. And also, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. So also where this might be coming from is a sign of Philip and Nathanael seem to be well studied in the prophets, in what they wrote about, in what all the Jewish people were looking forward to was the Messiah is going to come from the line of David, from this area, from this and this and this, and it has been set out. And so Nathanael's first reaction might have been going, not necessarily Nazareth is a bad city, but wait, that's not the place that the prophets were writing about. He might have been genuinely trying to make sure Philip was sure, you realize the prophets wrote that they were going to come from the city of David, and Nazareth isn't the city of David, y'all. But of course, there is prerequisite knowledge that they didn't have. So again, it might have come from city rivalry, it might have come from not knowing the full picture, it might have come from a genuine want to make sure they had the right guy. And so, as we've spread and looked at every possible angle of this, I don't think that Nathanael truly doubted that Jesus was the Messiah. I think that if his friend Philip was coming to him and saying, we've found the one whom Moses wrote about, I think he's taking that very seriously. but he wants to make sure that they have the right guy. And I don't think we can really blame him for any of that. It's very important to make sure that if someone is coming to you with life-changing knowledge, with something that could change the way you view the world or change the way that you go about your lives, I think it's very logical to make sense that you know that this is the right way to go. And so, if Nathaniel needed any more convincing, Philip says, just come and see. Just come and see. We'll work this out together. We'll make sure we have the right guy, but just come on and we'll figure it out. And so, as we continue in our reading, we see that Nathaniel's worries, that Nathaniel's possible hangups are put to rest. So if someone wants to read, going back into the book, if someone wants to read verses 47 through 51.
Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and said to him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, of whom there is no deceit. Nathanael said to him, How do you know me? Jesus answered and said to him, Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said to him, Because I said to you that I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending. So whatever...
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I turned 2 pages. Descending on the Son of Man.
There. All right. So, Nathaniel and Philip go back to Jesus to, kind of make sure this is the guy that we think it is. And as Jesus sees Nathaniel coming to him, he calls out, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no deceit. In the NIV, I believe it says, in whom there is nothing false. What's interesting is that the original Hebrew word that Jesus used to describe that word deceit is actually closer to the closest relative English word we have is guile. And I think for the most part, modern translations use deceit and stuff, just because guile isn't a word that we have in our vocabulary very often these days. It's not necessarily like an ancient word, but it's one of those $5 words. As you say guile, and people are like, ooh, what does guile mean? What? It holds more weight almost because of that kind of obscure meaning. The literal definition of guile in the Britannica, or not, that's the encyclopedia, in Webster's dictionary is sly or cunning intelligence. And so here we don't necessarily see that Jesus is saying, oh, he's not sly, he's not intelligent. As we've just seen as an example, he's saying that Nathaniel is not one to beat around the bush to try and not necessarily tell the truth to save someone's feelings. As we've just seen, Nathaniel is very forward and direct. He tells you exactly how he feels about what has just happened, and in this case, it is something that is very valued. Again, as they have differently translated it, Jesus is saying that, yeah, he's not going to mislead you. He's not going to use, half-truths and, not telling the whole truth to try and, leverage what he says. He's going to give you exactly what he knows. And like we've just seen, that's directly relatable to Nazareth. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? He's not doubting Jesus, but he's saying, that's not necessarily right, but now he's getting the full truth. And Jesus follows this up with, Nathanael says, how do you know me? And Jesus told him, before Philip called you, you were under a fig tree. I saw you. Now, one could make an argument of maybe there's just more fig trees in this area. But no, again, Jesus gives knowledge that could not have possibly been gleaned beforehand. They didn't have binoculars. Israel is not necessarily, this area is not necessarily even like a flat plains area. He couldn't have seen him from the distance coming. Again, Jesus shows in comparatively a pretty minor way of just how he is the human extension of the Lord. That something as simple as, I saw you sitting under this particular type of tree. And Nathanael, upon hearing this, falls down and says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel. And Jesus answered him and said to him, because I said to you, I saw you under a fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. Jesus isn't berating him for being so quick to believe. He's not saying, oh, what, you believe just after that? He's wanting to let Nathanael know, yes, that is just a small, incandescent speck of the power that I am going to show. And because of Nathanael's faith, because Nathanael needed very little prompting to follow him, he wants to let him know, it's good that you started following because of this small miracle, because what you're about to see is beyond description, is something that only I can do. Specifically, he says, most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Whoa. Went from 0 to 100 really, 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 really quick. Of, yeah, I could tell you what kind of tree you're sitting under. That's enough for me. Great, because I'm about to bring down literal celestial bodies to come and tend to my needs, to show you the power of the Lord. And Nathanael's going, if you say so, sure, whoa. He's fully understanding now what exactly he's now signed up for. It's not just, this guy isn't just like a minor sorcerer who can guess what tree you're sitting under and do these tricks here and there. He is the extension of the Lord. And after reading all the prophets and talking about, what kind of person is going to come and be the Messiah of God's people, to hear, I'm going to open the heavens up and angels will come and go as they please. That's even beyond what the prophets wrote. And so to hear that in person, to see someone like that give the confirmation that they are the person that you've been waiting for that your people have been waiting for decades, on centuries, the excitement must have been palpable. Nathanael having not his doubts, but truly finding out that the person that they had been studying for, the person they had been waiting for so long, was now here in front of him and promising that he would get to see great things. This is just incredible. And so, I told you that we wanted to read this first, of why we think that Nathanael and Bartholomew are the same person, is as John's Gospel continues, as we list all the apostles, they tend to follow an order. And usually that order is the order in which they were called. And so in John's Gospel, he lists Peter, Andrew, James, John, and then Philip and Nathanael. And Nathanael is listed as Nathanael in the Gospel of John. In the other three Gospels, like we said, how Bartholomew is the person who is mentioned. However, Nathanael and Bartholomew are always listed in the same spot. Is in the other three Gospels, Philip and Bartholomew are always listed one after the other, in the same way that John always lists Philip and Nathanael in the same places. And again, it's very telling that the other three Gospels never mention Nathanael by that name, and John never mentions Bartholomew as an apostle. If we were to have one of the 12 apostles suddenly go missing and get replaced, I think they would probably notate that. Yeah, and then Bartholomew just kind of wandered off one day, and hey, now we have Nathaniel. I don't that's not how that would have gone down. And so, yeah, that's just kind of like how they've started tying. That's layman's terms, how they've started tying. Bartholomew and Nathaniel are probably the same person. They're listed in the same order as coming after Philip, because Philip's the person who called him. But John is the one that goes into the story of how Philip is called by Jesus and then calls Nathaniel. Any other questions on, this whole section? Or
With John being written like 50 years later, there's a chance that he changed his name or how he was known over that time. So John might be identifying him as how he was known in 90 AD as opposed to in 40 or 50.
And thank you for reminding me, something I was talking about with Carrie, is the name Bartholomew is actually just a family designation, as Bartholomew in the language literally means son of Ptolemy or Ptolemy, depending on which language you're reading it from. But so in the same way that Peter, that was not Peter's original name. We know that Peter's original name was Simon, and then Jesus gave him the name Peter or Cephas. And so in the same way, Nathaniel could just be the name that Jesus gave to Bartholomew, as he was known, just son of Ptolemy. Yes, and Nathaniel specifically means, given from God. So that might even be the designation of, this is the name given by Jesus, given by God. And just a fun aside, Carrie was looking at, when I first told her that the subject was Nathaniel, I showed her the book, she goes, that's a weird spelling. I'm like, yeah, no, that's really the traditional spelling is of the Hebrew heritage is, Nathan is how we're used to Nathan, but then Ael is Nathanael instead of the just westernized Nathaniel Iel at the end. So that was a fun little thing that I hadn't thought about of, that is kind of a strange spelling we're not used to, and that's just because Western English has their ways of phonetically sounding things out.
So Bartholomew was the earlier, right? And Nathaniel is the one in John, correct? So if it means son of Ptolemy, if his dad passed away, there was a chance that he was known as the son of this guy back in the 30s, but by the time John wrote, he was no longer known as his father's son. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when my kids were growing up, there was a family that lived across the street, and they had children, they had Ricky and Laurie, and, but then as you knew them as adults, or, as they got older, they were Laura and Richard, so that could...
Names change. Often names you have for kids, they kind of want to be known in a more professional manner, as if the letter Y somehow denotes that you are a young child. But as time goes on, even Carrie was making the point this morning, is that whenever you put someone into your context as like a newly met person, if you don't know them from like a personal context, oftentimes how do you make sure you remember who that person is? If you meet your best friend's sister, do you put them in as just Nicole, or is it Nicole, Sarah's sister?
I have a lot of moms.
This person's mom, that person's daughter, And then, like, if you're in contact with someone who's redoing your house, do you often just put someone in as plumber, as roofing guy? A lot of times people were known by their relation to their father, their occupation. The reason we have last names like Miller, like names like Hunter, are basically just derived from, at one point your ancestor was a Miller, was this, did this, and so that kind of became your last name. So oftentimes names not only had like meanings in a language, but were also sometimes just, we have last names like Larson, you are Lars' son. Johnson, you are John's son. So it's very easy to tie the names together of this just might be how they were known at the time, and then a few years later they had moved on in a professional manner or had been known by something else because of their deeds, because of what they did.
My son Michael If you ask anybody in McFarland if they know Michael Ovidal, they'll tell you no. If you ask for Grover Ovidal, oh yeah, I know him.
Mhm.
It's a nickname he picked up in grade school.
Parents, whenever your children's friends come over to your house, are you known as your first name usually? Yeah, or are you, oh, hi, Carrie's mom. Oh, hi, Caleb's mom. Oh, hi. Hi, Baxter's dad. Very common, yeah, is you're known by your relations, yeah.
Yeah, when I was younger, my last name is Bussy. And all the kids had fun calling me the bus. You know, are you a school bus or are you another bus?
Yeah. So, we're people, we're humans. This is a practice. Yeah, nicknames are not just a modern thing. Nicknames, relational names have been going on since biblical times. Yeah.
Some of you people make it really hard for the preacher to find you in the hospital. Because, like in Janesville, there's a lady, Marie, but her real name was Alice. And then here, who would have thought that Walt was actually Sharon?
Yeah.
And all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a quick note on the fig tree. There are a couple prophecies in the Old Testament, in Micah and Zechariah, that in the last days, you would sit under your fig tree in peace, nobody would harm you, that kind of thing. So there was some speculation that people would go out under those fig trees and kind of dream of the last days and pray to God for the Messiah to come. So there was a chance that he was out there doing that.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, I saw you under your fig tree, which would have connected it into the Messiah,
Yeah.
perhaps.
And in Jesus looking for the kind of people that he wanted to be as apostles, he would want people that would at least have some kind of background knowledge of the writings of the prophets. And so to find someone sitting under a fig tree would be a fair assumption of that person is seeking peace, because of the prophets were writing about a time when everyone will sit under their own vine and fig tree. And so, yeah, to have this person seeking out that place of peace being under a fig tree, Jesus knows this is someone who has read the prophets, who is awaiting the Messiah, is awaiting me. And that's the kind of person I want following me.
That was
Yeah.
my big question. Is like, what was he doing under the fig tree? That's so makes it so significant.
Yeah.
But I think it's sorry, I'm doing a little bit reading, and the way that Philip says, we found him, who Moses and the law and the prophets wrote. Sounds like he and Philip are very well read, especially for probably fishermen or men of that stature, probably not necessarily expected to be literate, but have been doing a lot of reading and expecting. And then, I found another site talking about some interpretations of the fig tree. And the prophecies sitting under your vine and fig tree. Possibly he was studying or talking to other Jews about the coming of the Messiah. And that maybe it was even an expression at the time, being under the fig tree might have been an expression for being well read or interested.
Or seeking out knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because,
Interesting.
oftentimes in these times specifically, if you had a question about religious things, you go to the rabbi. Because that is the person who is well read on the things. In general, if you have a question about something, you want to seek out an expert. You want to seek out someone who knows about what you're asking about. And here, the fact that Philip hears this and goes to his friend Nathaniel, does kind of give the idea that both of them know the writings. They don't necessarily need a rabbi to explain what has just been said to them. They can converse with each other about, hey, I'm pretty sure we found the guy that matches up with what we've been reading. And in logical discussion, Nathaniel goes, wait, but didn't they say that this would be? No, that might be, just come on, we'll go find out. So very good point.
There's one other
Oh yeah, this is a discussion class, don't feel bad for discussing it.
that says possible that Nathaniel had received some sort of revelation or vision or something while under a fig tree that the Messiah was coming or something like that, which is totally speculative, but I think it's kind of interesting to think about, like, maybe he had some, like, big event happen under a fig tree that, you know, it kind of like, that makes such a strong connection, and that's why he's like, oh my gosh, it's you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, if I can't really come up with a real world example, but yeah, no, if you're
Someone was like, I saw you at the grocery store, I'd be like, cool, that's great, you know? But
Yeah.
if something significant happened, I'd be like, oh, wow, okay.
yeah, and yeah, that reading through the prophets and reading about that, yeah, when the Israelites would find peace, to be under a vine and fig tree, then yeah, you would equate that with almost fig trees having some kind of like almost a spiritual antenna. Like if the prophets held it up in that such high esteem, then maybe it was a good idea to have a fig tree close by. Because yeah, if the time is coming where we're going to find peace there, then I want to be as close as I can for when that time finally comes. Yeah.
I just missed or don't remember, where did you say, other than here, in that prophets go under fig trees to Micah?
Yeah, like we're talking Micah, and then you say, what was the other book extra?
Micah 4:4, Zechariah 3:10, and
Yep.
1 Kings 4:25.
Do you wanna-
This website.
Do you want to read Micah 4:4?
Micah 4:4. But everyone shall sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken.
And that chapter starts out saying, it will come about in the last days that this will happen.
And what did you say the Zechariah verse was?
Zechariah 3:10. In that day, says the Lord of hosts, everyone will invite his neighbor under his vine and under his fig tree. First Kings 4:25, supposedly. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, each man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan as far as Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. So yeah, it just gives like a very image of peace.
Yep.
I think, and like prosperity and like, and not prosperity necessarily, it's just like, yeah.
Comfort, yeah.
Having what you need.
A historical anecdote, whenever George Washington wrote his final letter of I'm stepping down from power, how he was giving away the presidency, he talked about how he very much longed to go back home. And the verse that he quotes is Micah. Every man will sit under his own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. He talked about I'm going to my fig tree. I'm going back to my vine as that comforting feeling of returning home. That was how he equated that, yeah.
I'm just curious, I don't know the answer, but did the fig tree by itself, just the tree, and it's a fig tree, have any semblance? Or is that just a name for a fruit?
It was a very prominent tree in the area of the time. It was known for very much it was one of the main fruit trees that they got a lot of their fruit from. I don't know if it had any cultural significance, if like any governments like used it as a symbol, or if any groups held it up as something. But the fig tree would have been well known to the people of this region. It was not a rare occurrence. It was not something special that you find. It was just something that was consistent, that was kind of across the area, that you could, if you found a fig tree, you knew that you would get fruit from it, that you could get food from it. Were there any other things like that?
I was just amazed at the George Washington reference. You know, like back in the
Yeah.
late 1700s, most people would have got that reference. They would, yeah. Today, if somebody said something like that, people have no clue what the guy's talking about.
They might have asked you, what poem is that from? It sounds poetic, but they maybe wouldn't have
Right.
equated that immediately, to the Bible.
We're so
Yeah.
disconnected. Like references like that mean nothing. Like
Yeah.
David and Goliath, Noah, and you got like people, they don't know those stories.
Yeah, there are even some colloquialisms and like phrases that are from the Bible that people use that they don't realize is from the Bible even. But for George Washington to use that at that time, establishing a country, one nation under God, that when they first established it was very much Christian minded, was very heavenly minded, was, yeah, to quote the Bible like that would have been very poignant. Yeah. Any other thoughts of our section here? All right. So to wrap up, then we want to stay in John, but if you want to turn over to chapter 21. Chapter 21. This is after everything has gone down. This is post crucifixion, resurrection, Jesus showing himself back to the apostles. There's kind of that area of lull in between Jesus's resurrection and then ascension after he shows himself. And so this is part of the same story that we studied with Peter, of how Jesus comes to the shore and the fishermen are again going out having no luck, and then he once again calls out and tells them to drop their nets, and they catch a whole bunch of fish. And then Peter, as soon as John tells him this is Jesus, jumps out of his boat with his coat on and goes swimming. In the same kind of section here, just real quick, want to read verses 1 through 4. After these things, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, who was called Didymus, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we are also coming with you. They went out and got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, yet the disciples did not know it was Jesus. So here we see that Nathanael is one of the people who is still sticking around. Yes, there was the time at the crucifixion where the apostles fled, where Peter denies Jesus, where everyone kind of scatters to the wind as this is all going down. But here we see that after all the dust settles, that Nathanael is a part of the few that come back together. That even though they're ashamed of what went down, they're ashamed of how they reacted to what has happened, Jesus reveals himself to them, that Jesus comes back just like he says that he said that he would, and the disciples rejoice. Because even though they had a moment of doubt, they had a moment of turning away, Jesus, just like he said, still returned. And, he wanted them to know, yes, there was a moment, but you still come back together. You are all still supporting one another. And then, of course, he gives them the Great Commission, go out and make apostles of all nations, or make disciples of all nations, more specifically. And even after that, the apostles, like I said, why was Peter going out fishing again? Maybe not necessarily going back to his old life, but just kind of wanting to kill some time, awaiting further instruction. And here we see that Nathanael is one of the ones that is specifically mentioned as being a part of the group that is still there. They've gone through horrible things. They've gone through persecution. They've gone through people attempting to slander the name of Jesus, of literally trying to kill Jesus. And yet, they're still here. They're still disciples, and they're still spreading the good word. And so as we wrap up today, Nathanael is a good example of always making sure that you have the right idea. If anyone ever brings knowledge to you that you feel like you need to compare to the experts that you need to actually take the Bible and compare it to, don't let anyone try and berate you, try and make you feel silly for wanting to just make sure that this is right. Wanting to make sure that, yes, this is also what the Bible says. And even beyond biblical context, if someone comes to you and says something that goes against what you might be thinking, what you might believe, make sure that that's the right thing. If, that is the basis upon what knowledge is. Knowledge is not just the things that you think you know. Knowledge is what you know because that you've compared it to that which is true. And we are very blessed that in our religious lives, in our religious walks, that we have the structure upon which our life is built. That we can compare it to that. But always, one, be willing to hear knowledge that is given, knowledge that is given, but always make sure that it is based in what is true. Whether it's religious matters, whether it's who you allow into your inner circle in life in general, whatever you do, just make sure that the knowledge that you keep is based on fact. Yeah.
And generally speaking, as we're talking with people, we shouldn't we shouldn't say, well, just trust me on that.
Right.
Like,
We ourselves should have undisputable proof that what we're saying is true.
it should be
Absolutely.
Phillips, come and see, instead of just saying, well, it's because I said so.
Right? Yeah. Any other closing thoughts? Any fun facts that people have for dismiss? All right. Thank you for another wonderful class.